Good to be here. Always good to be here. How you doing, yo, bollocks? It's your boy Matt Micucci welcoming you to another episode of Matt's Art Chat. On this episode, I speak with painter and photographer Fabio Torre. Now, Fabio lives in northern Italy, much like John Bleasdale, the writer whom I interviewed on the last podcast. But, unlike the last podcast, we're not going to talk much about the coronavirus pandemic here. No siree. There's too many people talking about it already. And that doesn't mean I won't talk about it in another podcast that I'll record somewhere down the line. But for now, Fabio and I decided to stick to a chat about painting and photography and art. And we also talk about some of his most recent projects, including a photography book dedicated to the iconic, legendary and famed Chelsea Hotel in New York City, which has been closed for a few years. And we also talk about a recent exhibition that he held in New York City, but that unfortunately had to be closed about 2 weeks into its run. And you can probably guess why. Yep, that's why. That's why. And it's another reminder of how the art world has been impacted by this coronavirus pandemic. But if you are watching or listening to this, I hope you're safe and sound and healthy, and you'll stay that way. And if you're not, I hope you get well soon. These are tough times, these are crazy times, but we need to stay strong. We need to stay strong. It's not easy, but we need to stay strong. Anyways, I'll keep this introduction short now because it's very late. You can probably tell that I'm very tired, but I want to get this episode up and rolling by tomorrow, like every Thursday. So, without further ado, thank you very much for deciding to spending some time with me. And if you're watching this video but you need to go off and do something else, remember that you can still listen to it on your phone, on Podbean and Spotify. For now, Matt's Art Chat is on YouTube, Podbean, and Spotify. That's right. Thank you very much for listening or watching. Enjoy.
Hello.
Hello, Fabio. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. I'm very well. What about you?
Oh, I'm doing okay. I'm still stuck at home, like I suppose you are too.
Like me, yes, the same. Same life, okay.
And you also happen to be in one of the, let's say for now, worst hit areas of the world of this coronavirus, right?
Yeah, especially my region, but now we are recovering. The last data are better, so I think, I hope in 2 weeks we will be close to the normal life.
Yes. Now, this is not the first time we try to do this call. Because we have had technical difficulties, and so hopefully we will be able to, the recording will be fine now. So you have already answered this question in the previous attempts, but just to give a structure to this little podcast of mine, would you like to maybe share with anyone who is eavesdropping in our conversation where exactly in the world you are right now?
Yeah, I am in my studio, which is located in Bagnarola di Budio, a very small place. Not far from the main town, which is Bologna. Bologna is in the northern part of Italy, and it's a very medieval town. And my place also is not medieval, but the buildings are between 17th and 18th century. So a very nice place in the country.
Yes. And do you like to live in the country?
Yes, let me tell you that I love the way I live, but I need the city. So every day it's a matter of 15 minutes driving. I go in town to meet friends or to do something, go to the cinema galleries or bookstores. This is something I need. But anyway, I'm used to stay alone in my studio. And this gives me a good concentration on my work. I think I'm happy this way.
Yes, of course. If you are in your studio, then it's like you are in your own little universe.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So you enjoy spending time in the studio, especially right
Oh,
now.
oh yes, absolutely. I do. I had some painting to complete. It's strange because I have plenty of time now for painting, but I don't feel the pressure, and I need the pressure to work. So I do not so much, but I do a lot of reading. I fix many things. The studio is a mess sometimes, so you have a lot of things to fix, to put in order, and this is the right time to do it. Anyway, I have been working so hard in the past 2 years, and maybe some relaxing time is not that bad.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So, one of the things that I know is that you not only paint, but you also take photographs. Now, why do you work with both paintings and photography?
Yeah, I think in my practice they are strictly related. I'm not a photographer in terms of equipment or skill. I don't consider myself a photographer despite having published a couple of books of photography, like the recent book about the Chelsea Hotel in New York. But my work as a painter is very strongly connected to photography. I think in the past 15, 20 years, my painting has been a kind of long conversation with photography and reflection on photography. And more recently, we came at a kind of short circuit between painting and photography. So I have been doing paintings that conceptually recall photography and even represent the instruments of photography, like cameras or things like that, or films and whatever.
Fabio, which one? So, what did you start doing first? Did you start painting first or take photographs?
No, I think painting. Photograph came later.
Was there, and when did you start painting? What age were you roughly?
Oh, I think I started painting when I was about 12, I think, or 13. And then I had a kind of short career. And I had to stop between 25 and 35, 40 years where I was busy with the other job I have with horses. And then I came back to painting and restarted. And that time, shortly after, photography started to catch my interest. Okay.
Interesting. Yes. Would you like to just for the sake of documenting this, would you like to maybe elaborate on your work with the horses?
Oh yeah, of course. I studied veterinary medicine, and I started to travel around the world. I spent a lot of time in the north of Europe and United States for practicing. And then when I came back, I started a clinic. This was the very first private clinic for equine clinic in Italy. And this was quite successful and still is running and working. But then I realized that I needed my work as an artist. So I went to a compromise, and after a few years, I reached a kind of 50-50 between the two jobs. And I'm quite happy with it because I can do very interesting things with horses. And at the same time, because the spaces are very close, I can do my work as an artist. So this is my life. It's a kind of split, between two worlds.
But do you think that your work with the horses, or maybe having that educational background, also influences your work as an artist?
Yeah, I think basically yes. Not specifically for horses, but I think I had scientific formation. So I think my approach to painting and even photography and what I do as an artist is influenced by my scientific status. So I think I can apply many rules of the scientific world to painting, like, for example, to be updated, to try to do something which is original, not done before. And so I think I think science influenced my work as an artist. They seems to be close, not so far from each other.
Yeah. So back to your early days of paintings, I just wanted to know whether when you started painting, there were specific themes or things that you liked to represent via your art. Do you think there
Well,
was?
yeah, initially I think I was mostly attracted by the human body because when I started painting, I did a couple of years of studying about anatomy, and this is the scientific part of myself, trying to study, try not to be kind of amateur in painting. You must be a professional. So, and the human body attracted me very, very much. And then I think when I started with my interest for photography, something changed, even the subjects. Like I had a period of 6-7 years where I mostly painted urban landscapes. So places which were known as non-places according to Marc Auger book. And so airports, shopping center, places like this where the human presence was quite silent and anonymous. And then I came back to the human body in form of portraiture, and more recently to some objects like cameras, guns, everything connected with photography. I mean, so this is the path I followed.
Yeah, as far as I understand, what you just said there is related to your recent exhibition, which we will be talking about later. But first, I wanted to ask you about your fascination with the human body. I know that you mentioned that you have your scientific background and interests might have had something to do with it, but do you think there's another reason why you're interested in the human body? And when you say the human body, do you mean all types of human bodies or specific types?
Oh, yes, very specific, I tell you, because, okay, the human body to me is the portrait, and the portraiture is one of the genre more important in the history of art, one of the most ancient and to me most modern. When in the 50s there were in USA the abstract expressionists, the main art critic said that one thing is for sure now, there is no place for portraiture anymore. But at the same time, he didn't know that there were people growing up like named like Andy Warhol or Chuck Close or Alex Katz, who eventually will mostly became famous for portraiture. I think the portrait is a kind of genre which will be forever. And my specific portraiture is about the male portraiture. I only do male portraits of young people, mostly friends, artists, friends, generally speaking, because people I know. And then I ask to come to my studio to sit for photograph sessions. And then I select portraits. And sometimes I like to do kind of serial portraits. I mean, the same person portrayed in the same canvas 2 times or 3 times to make kind of serial portraits. This lower the importance of the person, but on the other side gives more strength, more power to the person. Because when if you look at the recent portraiture, to give power to the portrait, you have 2 ways. Or make it large, like Chuck Close does, for example, or try to repeat it, like Warhol did.
So when you're taking these portrait photos, like you said, do you direct your subject, your friends who are posing in front of the camera?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I ask. I'm very strict. There are strict rules, like, for example, they must be dressed possibly in black or dark blue, something that, because I only do black and white paintings. This is one point. And so don't want to have the important point must be the face of the guy, and not the shirt or the jacket or whatever. They are very minimal. I think I was strongly influenced by the minimalist sculpture. So even my portraits look like minimalist sculptures, and so I want. Even the expression must be very neutral, with no smile, no story, no narration. Okay, a kind of a zero level of narration, and this is the reason why they look alike.
I just want to make sure that I have this right. You do black and white photography then only?
Oh yes, and everything is analogical. I don't use any digital apparatus.
I was going to ask you, do you work with color when you paint, or also do you keep that minimal, the color in your painting minimal?
Oh yeah, my painting are black and white. That's all. Very simple.
Right. So why is that? Is it just because you like the contrast, or?
I think there are many reasons. One can be a very simple reason why maybe I have problems with colors, with using colors. The other reason, I think, this relationship with photography. I think the black and white more strongly refers to photographs, and also the photograph I like is the black and white photograph. I think is more. It's a kind of reduction of your information, to concentrate your information, and but I think it works well. My language is black and white.
So so when you take photographs, you only work with analog equipment.
Yeah, exactly right.
Why is that?
Because I think maybe I started with it, and I didn't want to move to digital. And also I love all the work of developing the films and then printing a photograph, which is something difficult. I have a dark room, and luckily I have a friend who is very, very skilled in the dark room, and he helps me a lot in the process of printing. And when you print a photograph in an analogic way, is like not to do a painting, but more close than working on a computer desk, And so I think I like the end results of the analogic photographs. I think I will be always working with it, not with digital.
Okay. Well, yes, it's more organic, I would say, which is interesting because you're fascinated.
There is a lot of manual,
Yeah, and it's interesting to think that there is a link or an association between the human body and the organic process of working with analog equipment, right?
Yeah, because the human body is something chemical, like photography when you print, which is something totally absent in the digital process.
Yeah, I have heard theorists in the past refer to film, like the actual material film, as skin.
Yeah, no, not bad. Yes, I think it's right. Yeah.
Earlier, you mentioned Andy Warhol. Would you consider him to be an influence of yours?
Oh, absolutely. I think the contemporary portraiture started with him, and I think you must accept this reference. I think it's very important. I think it's the right junction between photography and painting, I think, because his screen print are a combination of photography and painting. So I think is the good example to mention.
Yeah. Is there anything that you like about him as an artist? Maybe his personality or the way he approached his work?
Okay, yes, of course, he's a person. The character of the person is quite far from myself. I mean, the image was very superficial. The image he wanted to give the public. I think he was a great artist with a great culture, but he wanted to lower the level of art to the popular level. The pop term comes from that. And but this was a kind of marketing strategy because he was also interested in money, But I think you don't have to go wrong with him. I mean, he was a great artist, and I think we, especially 50 years after, we must see him as a great example, a great step in the artwork in the last century. I think Andy Warhol himself was a kind of artwork. He wanted to be like this, but I'm not interested in this.
Yeah, okay. So in 1966, Andy Warhol directed his film called Chelsea Girls, and now your book is called Hotel Chelsea or Chelsea Hotel. What's the title again?
No, the title we gave the book is simply the address of the hotel, 222 West 23rd Street, New York City. Yeah, Warhol he directed the film in the Chelsea rooms with a group of, we call it stars, superstars. And it was one of the very first underground film of the era. Yes, and of course the Chelsea Hotel at that time it was in these roaring years, where many famous people were living, or people that later became famous were living there, and like Miller, like Janis Joplin, Leonard Cohen, writers, poets, filmmakers, artists, and whatever. And so he's part of the legend of the Chelsea.
Another person who lived there was one of my favorite filmmakers, Milos Forman. And I know from his biography that it was a place where you didn't have to pay much for rent. And so he could afford to live on very little money at a time when he wasn't making any money. So it was almost like where artists went to survive before they could become discovered, right?
Yeah, because I know the director of the Chelsea, Stanley Bard, told me about Milos Forman. He had no money and he couldn't speak a single word of English when he came to New York, but he helped him. He gave him a room. I had the opportunity to stay in his room one time, and when he became famous, I think he wanted to thank in some way Stanley Bard for his generosity, his help. He was one of the person who became famous after living in the Chelsea. People like the artist Christo, for example, and many others, Patti Smith, Robert Mapplethorpe. And yes, Milos Forman was one of them, one of the most talented, I think.
Yeah. Hey, so tell me more about this book.
Yeah, the book was born this way. I think I stayed regularly at the Chelsea in the past 18, 20 years. The Chelsea closed in 2011. And I took a lot of photographs. Every time I came, photographs, not of the people, but mostly the rooms, the artworks, details of the Chelsea, furniture. And then when the hotel closed nearly 10 years ago, looking back at this work, I realized that probably I photographed the end of the place, the death of the place. So I decided to put the photographs together and to publish this book that, unlike other books about the Chelsea Hotel, where mostly people are represented, famous people, or even rooms, huge rooms with a lot of luxury, not visible to the public because they were private apartments, I decided to publish this book where you can, I think, feel this strange atmosphere of the place. You feel that most of the people are gone, maybe are dead, but they left something like their breath on things. And so I think that these details of the hotel tell you something about a place that is now under refurbishing, but I think it will never be the same in the future. So,
going back to what you said about the human body and your fascination with the human
yeah,
body, when
yeah.
you try to shoot a place, do you still try to look at it as you would a human body?
Yeah, maybe, yes, because I think yes, this was a different approach. I think, but I think the Chelsea was a kind of human body, quite sick in the last years, because many things didn't work in that place, and but I think. Living there, you can feel that each person left something there, and something remained there. Not only artworks or memories, but even I don't know. It was very hard, for example, to sleep in the same room where Patti Smith slept with Mapplethorpe for some years, or maybe where Sid Vicious killed his girlfriend. And so on, or even the Milos Forman room was very nice because there was a very large, two walls were occupied by a large library, totally empty, totally white. I can imagine all his books in this library. So I think there was a kind of, I don't know, some ghost remained at Chelsea forever.
Right, so it's also about the absence of those bodies then.
You are right. This is a book about the absence. Of course, all photographs are black and white, analogic. And also one of the atmospheres you felt at the Chelsea was a kind of a film noir atmosphere, It was a very noir place. In some places, I mean, and I think the book reflects this atmosphere.
Yeah. Hey, so I right now I'm thinking that I don't actually know what happened to the Chelsea Hotel after it closed. Do you know what happened to it?
Oh yeah, I think it was sold. Was sold to a real estate company, and they eventually sold the hotel again, and it was sold one third time, and now I think there is a lot of lawsuit between the owners, between the people. Somebody is still living there in apartments because they had some contracts still existing. So I think there are some tenants living there, and also I know there is some lawsuit between the city of New York and the owners, because they did something wrong with the tenants. And anyway, the works, the refurbishing works still are going on. I think the outside is nearly complete. They are working inside. But somebody told me that it's still a mess. I know a guy who is living in the Chelsea and it's still a mess inside. So
earlier, I asked you about when you started painting, but I don't think I asked you when you started taking photographs.
Yes, when I started taking photographs. I think I started taking photographs seriously in the 90s, I think, in the early 90s, yeah.
What were you taking the photographs of? What were your subjects back then, early?
Okay, outside the studio, I was attracted mostly by the city life, we can say, but that was not street photography. I was more attracted by some parts of the city, very close, I would say, to Atget, the French photographer in the early last century, who did the photographs of places without a specific importance, I think. But then we understood that these places had some importance. So, and then I moved to a more specific subject, especially when I started to study photography, because I did specific studies. I have a graduation in history of art, especially history of photography. And then I started to love photographers like Robert Mapplethorpe, like Peter Hoosier, like Duane Michaels, and most of them were working on the human body.
You mentioned Patti Smith a couple of times earlier. Is she an influence of yours too?
Yes, I was strongly influenced by her. And also I published a photographic book about Patti Smith a few years ago, 10 years ago nearly. And I had also the opportunity to meet her, to speak with her sometimes. Very nice person. But I think what is thrilling to me, maybe it's not her talent as a singer or as a poet, which is out of question, of course. But what I love in her is that she has the power of, it's a bad word, recycling the culture. So she can use poets, artists, photographers in her artwork and make something original again, using the poets and the artists of the past, like Rimbaud, like many others. And I think she's original, but she can recycle, she can bring us the culture of the past decades, okay?
Yeah. How did you meet Patti Smith?
I was very naive because I wanted to meet her, so I asked her agent to meet her, and she told me, "You are crazy." I told her, "No, I'm not crazy. I just want to talk with her." But this was quite easy because she organized the first encounter after a concert, and I showed her what I was doing. And when I published the book, the book was totally published. She wasn't aware of anything, and it was a photographic book about Patti Smith, who is a photographer. She is a photographer, and she has been photographed by the main photographers probably in the last 30, 40 years. But she was very nice because she loved the book, and she told me that I caught the light and the dark of her performance. She was very nice.
No, that sounds lovely. So with this coronavirus outbreak that has been going on, artists are influenced left and right. And unfortunately, you have somehow been impacted by it as well, because there was an exhibition in New York of your works, which you mentioned earlier, right?
Yeah. This was a very, very funny story because the work I've been doing the last 2 years was a single project named Camera Work. Camera Work comprised about 50 artworks, paintings, focused on the power of the cameras as an object, as an eye, as a kind of erotic object also. And this project was supposed to be shown in 2 galleries, nearly overlapping times. The show in New York opened the beginning of March, and the show in Bologna at the Studio G7 was supposed to open on April 4th. So we opened the show in New York, but as you know, it had to close after 2 weeks, and the show in Bologna will be hopefully moved to May.
Yeah. So just to know a little bit more about it, you mentioned the camera as an erotic object. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I feel, especially the analogic large cameras, they are heavy stuff, like the Hasselblad or the Mamiya. And I don't know, I feel a kind of erotic power when I look through the eye of the camera, especially if I have a subject in my studio. I think nothing more than photography can have this power. Even the video is not so powerful. But I think because the video is strictly related to the time, but the photography, especially if you hold a print, is something that gives you the impression of possession of a body, of a person. And I feel, and you get this power through the camera. So I think the camera has a kind of erotic power to me, at least to me.
What about when you say, have an exhibition like this of your work, what are your emotions? Do you feel nervous about people looking at your work hanging on a wall? What are your emotions like?
No, I'm not nervous. I'm quite, no, I'm fine. I'm fine because, when you have been working for 2 years of this subject and they are demanding work. So I think sometimes they stay on the easel for months. So I think you became so accustomed to art, to your artwork. And of course, it's always a surprise when you see your work coming out of the studio and hanging on the white box of the gallery. It's something else. But no, I feel happy, not nervous, absolutely not.
So you must have been disappointed when you found out that the exhibition in New York had to be cancelled, right?
Yeah, it's not been cancelled, and it's still running. But of course, the gallery is closed. But we had the opportunity to show the work for a couple of weeks. So I think most of the people, come to the opening. Maybe the art critics and the collectors. Most of them they had the opportunity to see the show. Somebody can look at the show by appointment. So I think it's not lost. I mean, and anyway, it has been a nice show. Okay.
Yeah. Hey, so are you working on anything interesting at the moment that you would like to share?
Honestly, this time I finished a few works still part of this project because there were 6 paintings that I had to finish and I completed them. And also I did the only original work I did in this period is a double portrait. And I will send you a picture of one of my subjects and nothing else, honestly, nothing else.
Hey, how can people keep up with your news and upcoming projects? Is there a way, maybe online, like a website?
Oh, yeah. I think the website of the New York Gallery, Clamp Art, the Clamp Art has all the show on his website, so they can see the single artwork and the show together. And also, I think the Studio G7, as soon as hopefully in the beginning of May, we will put together the work will be shown there. Yeah. Let's have a look of the Clamp Art website.
Fabio, it's been a pleasure talking with you. Thank you very much for doing this. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you, Matt. It was my pleasure. Okay, thank you.